Have you ever noticed that the same sentence, spoken by two different people, lands in your body in completely different ways? Someone you barely know says, "You're being dramatic," and it rolls off like water on glass. But when it comes from that one person, the one whose opinion you've silently collected and cataloged, it doesn't just land, it enters. It finds a home. And hours later, you're still arguing with it in your head, defending yourself to a ghost. Why is that? Why does the source rewrite the sentence? You've been told you're too sensitive, that you need thicker skin, that words are just vibrations in the air, sequences of sounds, and you're choosing to be wounded by them. But that's not what's happening, is it? You're not choosing the wound. The wound was already there, mapped into your nervous system, waiting for the right frequency to resonate. The words aren't the weapon, they're the key that unlocks a door you forgot you installed. And the moment you hear them, you're not just hearing language, you're hearing confirmation of something you've always been afraid might be true about you. This is where it begins, not with the words themselves, but with the architecture of belief you built inside yourself. A silent, invisible structure made of assumptions you never agreed to, but inherited, absorbed, constructed. And every day you scan the world for evidence that this structure is real. You don't know you're doing it. You think you're just having conversations, reading texts, overhearing comments, but underneath your system is running a constant validation check, asking one question: does this match what I believe about myself? And when it does, when the words align with the architecture, the pain isn't an injury, it's a recognition. Think about the last time someone's words actually hurt you. Not annoyed you, not frustrated you, hurt you. Where did you feel it? Probably not in your ears. It was lower. A tightening in your chest, a cold weight in your stomach, a flush up your neck. The body doesn't react to phonetics. It reacts to meaning, and meaning isn't in the word's meaning, is in the interpretation. And interpretation is where your beliefs live. So the pain isn't from what they said, it's from what you translated it to mean about who you are. Now, consider this. Someone calls you selfish. The word itself is neutral. S-E-L-F-I-S-H. 7 letters. But you don't hear 7 letters. You hear, "You are the kind of person who takes up too much space. You are the person who doesn't deserve connection because you prioritize your own needs. You are the person who will end up alone." You hear a life sentence. And where did that translation come from? Not from them. They just said a word. You provided the entire courtroom, the judge, the jury, and the guilty verdict. You believed the prosecution's case because you'd already written it yourself. This is the first pattern to recognize. You are not a passive recipient of language. You are an active prosecutor of yourself, using other people's words as evidence in a trial that only you are attending. And the sentence you're serving? It's self-concept, it's identity. It's the story you have about what kind of person you are allowed to be. Let me show you how this plays out in a moment so mundane you wouldn't even remember it unless I pointed to it. You're in a group chat. Someone makes a joke about people who think too much. You don't respond. But 3 minutes later, you reread your last message in that chat, analyzing whether it seemed like you were overthinking. You delete it. You type something lighter, something that won't get categorized. You hit send, but now you're monitoring the read receipts. When no one replies for 10 minutes, your chest tightens. The belief activates. See, you say too much. You think too deeply. You make people uncomfortable. And the original joke? It wasn't even about you. But it didn't need to be. It just needed to be close enough to the architecture of your insecurity to trigger the full blueprint. This is the mechanism underneath the moment. Words don't hurt you. They activate a self-belief system that was already armed and waiting. And the moment of activation is so fast, milliseconds, that you experience it as a direct impact. You think their words hurt me. But the truth is, their words matched a belief I already hold about myself, and that belief is what hurts constantly, whether anyone speaks or not. Now here's the disruption. What if the words that hurt you most are the ones you secretly agree with? Not consciously, not in the light of day, but in the basement of your mind, where the foundations are poured. What if every sting is just an echo of your own voice, confirming what you've always suspected, that you're fundamentally flawed in some specific, unfixable way? And what if the reason you can't let it go, can't stop replaying it, is because you're not actually arguing with them? You're arguing with yourself. You're trying to unbelieve something you already believe. And that's why it's exhausting. That's why it loops. The identity implication here is subtle but catastrophic. You have become a detective of your own inadequacy, and every conversation is a crime scene where you're looking for clues that you were right about yourself all along. This isn't sensitivity. This is a self-concept so unstable that it requires constant external scaffolding to stay upright. And when the scaffolding shakes even slightly, the whole structure feels like it's coming down. But wait, why do some people seem immune? Why can your colleague hear the same criticism and literally laugh it off while you're dismantling your entire personality at 2 a.m.? This is where we shift into a new angle, because the answer isn't that they're stronger or that you're weaker. It's that their architecture is different. They don't have a door where you have a door. They don't have a belief that resonates at that frequency. The words hit a wall and fall. Yours hit a hollow space and ring for hours. Consider this scenario. You're at a family dinner. Your parent says, "You've always been the sensitive one." It's not an insult, it's an observation. But you feel it like a brand. Why? Because somewhere in your history, sensitive got coded as weak, as difficult, as the problem child. And now that word isn't just a description, it's a category that contains your entire childhood experience of being misunderstood. So you don't hear sensitive. You hear, you're still that child who couldn't handle things. You're still broken in that specific way. And the belief system lights up like a switchboard. See, even they know. It's not in your head, it's real. But here's the contradiction that will break this open. If the pain comes from belief, and belief is internal, why does it matter who says it? Why does the same word from a stranger feel different than from someone you love? Because belief isn't just internal, it's relational. You have beliefs about yourself, but you also have beliefs about what other people believe about you. And those second-order beliefs are often more powerful than the first. You might believe you're competent, but if you believe your boss believes you're incompetent, their words will cut. The wound isn't in your self-belief, it's in your belief about their belief. It's metacognitive. It's a house of mirrors where you're trying to stabilize your reflection based on what you think they're seeing. This is the behavioral pattern that keeps you trapped. You don't just listen to words, you measure them. You weigh them against the authority you've assigned to the speaker. You have an internal hierarchy of whose reality counts more than yours. And at the top of that hierarchy is usually someone whose approval you never fully received but never stopped seeking. Their words are heavier because you've given them the power to be the final arbiter of your identity. You've outsourced your self-concept to them, but you did it so long ago you think it's just how relationships work. Now, let's go deeper into the architecture itself. How are these beliefs built? Not in therapy sessions or dramatic moments. They're built in the gaps. The silence after you expressed a need. The dismissal when you showed emotion. The praise that came only when you achieved, never when you existed. You learned that certain aspects of you were acceptable and others were liabilities. So you built a self that was a portfolio of acceptable traits, and you buried the liabilities in the basement. But they didn't disappear. They became the beliefs that hurt you. Because every time someone says something that even brushes against that buried part, your system screams, don't let them see it. Don't let them confirm it's real. The identity exposure here is brutal. You are not who you think you are. You are who you think you're supposed to be, defending against what you believe you actually are. And the words that hurt are always the ones that threaten to expose the supposed to be as a performance and the actually as the truth. This is why you can receive 100 compliments and 1 criticism. And the criticism is the only thing that echoes. The compliments land on the performance. The criticism lands on the fear. Let me show you another scenario, this one digital and delayed. You post something online, it gets mostly positive responses. But one comment says, "This is a weird take." You delete the post, not because they were right, but because weird touched the belief that your perspective is inherently alienating. That belief was already there, formed from years of being told you were too much or too intense. So you don't just read a comment, you read confirmation that your authentic self is socially radioactive. And the deletion isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about erasing evidence that you momentarily let the real self slip out. This is the perception versus reality gap widening in real time. You perceive the comment as an objective judgment, but the reality is, it's one data point filtered through your belief system and inflated into a universal truth. Your mind doesn't distinguish between frequency and intensity. One mention of weird weighs more than 50 mentions of brilliant because weird matches the architecture. And the architecture is always scanning for threats, not affirmations. Now, a sudden question to spike retention: what if the words you most want to hear are also the most dangerous? What if "I'm proud of you" from the right person feels like oxygen, but from the wrong person feels like nothing? That discrepancy reveals the dependency. You've tethered your emotional stability to specific voices, which means those voices control your inner atmosphere. They don't even know they're doing it. You gave them the keys and forgot you had them copied. The behavioral pattern that emerges from this is what I call selective hearing at the identity level. You don't just hear what you want to hear, you hear what your belief system allows you to hear. Anything that contradicts the core negative belief gets filtered out, rationalized as politeness or misunderstanding. Anything that confirms it gets highlighted, underlined, and stored in permanent memory. You are building a case against yourself, and you rig the jury. Let's expose the ego's role here, because the ego isn't what you think it is. The ego isn't arrogance, it's the constructed self. It's the identity you've built to navigate the world, and it is fragile. Not because it's weak, but because it's fake. It's a compilation of traits, not the source code. So when words challenge it, the ego doesn't just defend, it panics. Because if the ego is wrong, what is left? The emptiness underneath is terrifying. So the ego fights back by making the words mean everything, by inflating their importance, by turning a comment into a catastrophe. This isn't immaturity, it's the logical outcome of identifying with a construct instead of the consciousness that observes it. The internal contradiction deepens. You want to be known, but you only want to be known for the acceptable parts. You want to be seen, but you edit what you show based on what you believe will be rejected. So you live in a paradox where you crave authentic connection but perform a self that is connection-proof because it's not real. And the words that hurt are the ones that see through the performance, even for a second. They hurt because they're true. Not true about your inadequacy, true about your inadequacy, true about your inauthenticity. Here's a scenario that will feel like I was watching you. You're in a meeting. You make a suggestion. Your manager says, "That's interesting, but let's stay focused." Hours later, you're still dissecting interesting. Did it mean creative, or did it mean off track? Did it mean valuable, or did it mean distracting? You're not just analyzing their words, you're trying to determine where you sit in their mental hierarchy. Because if you're high, interesting is a compliment. If you're low, it's a polite dismissal. And you don't know which it is because your belief system doesn't give you a stable seat at the table. So you oscillate, and the oscillation is the pain. The uncertainty of your own position is what makes the word a weapon. This is the social dynamics layer. You are not just an individual with beliefs. You are a node in a network of belief exchange. Every interaction is a transaction where you're trying to buy a stable identity with the currency of approval. But the exchange rate is rigged because you don't believe you have anything of value to offer. So you keep paying more effort, more editing, more self-monitoring, and getting less stability in return. And the words that hurt are the ones that remind you the market is about to crash. Now, a sudden realization to spike retention. The reason you can't just let it go isn't because you're holding on to the words. It's because the words are holding on to you. They've hooked into a belief that is literally keeping your identity structure intact. If you let go of the belief, you let go of the self. And the self, however painful, is familiar. It's known. The unknown self, the one that might exist without that belief, is more terrifying than the pain. So you cling to the wound because the wound is part of your architecture. Let's talk about the awareness gap, because this is where transformation lives. There is a micro moment between hearing and believing. It's so fast you've never noticed it, but it's there. In that gap, the raw data of the words exists before the interpretation layers on, before the belief system translates it into meaning. That gap is your exit, but you can't find it by trying harder. You find it by slowing down, by watching the translation happen in real time. By asking, what did I just make that mean about me? Not what did they say, but what did I believe? This is the behavioral pattern shift from reactive to observant. But observation isn't detachment. It's intimacy with your own mechanism. It's sitting in the control room and watching the switches flip. And as you watch, you realize you're the one flipping them. You always were. Their words just provided the cue. The belief is your response, and responses can be unlearned. But here's the dark intensity moment. Unlearning feels like dying. Because when you stop believing the thing that hurts, you stop being the person who gets hurt by that thing. And who are you then? The ego will fight this. It will say you're being avoidant, that you're suppressing, that you're not dealing with reality. But the reality is, the belief was never reality. It was a coping mechanism that became a prison. And the words were just guards walking by. A scenario to ground this. You're lying in bed, scrolling. You see a post from someone you used to know. They've achieved something. The caption is humble, but you read it as performative. You feel that familiar squeeze. Not jealousy, something else. Something that says, you will never have that because you are not that kind of person. You keep scrolling, but the belief has already been triggered. You don't realize that the post was just a post. You turned it into evidence. You believed the translation, and now your body is living in the reality of that belief, not the reality of the moment. The identity implication is this. You are not a fixed self being wounded by a hostile world. You are a fluid process of meaning making, and you've been making the same meaning over and over because you think it's true. But it's not true. It's just practiced. It's a neural pathway that's been myelinated through repetition, and the words that hurt are the ones that travel that pathway most efficiently. Now, let's shift to the social dynamics of collective belief. You think you're the only one doing this? Everyone is. Everyone has their architecture, their hierarchy of whose words matter, their buried liabilities, their performance self. So what you're experiencing isn't a personal flaw, it's the human condition. But that doesn't make it less painful. It makes it more shared. And the sharing is what creates the trap. Because when everyone is performing, everyone is lonely. And when you're lonely, you become more desperate for the words that might connect you. But the words that connect are the ones that see through the performance, and those are the words you fear most. A contradiction to sit with. The more you need someone's words to be positive, the more negative you perceive them as being. This is because your belief system is calibrated for threat detection, not connection. So even a neutral comment gets read as potential danger. You're not reading for meaning, you're reading for survival. And survival in this case means identity preservation. Here's a scenario that will feel like a memory. You're having a good day. You feel light. Then you get a text from a parent, a partner, a friend. It says, "We need to talk later." Nothing else. And your entire day collapses. Not because of the words, because of the belief you instantly assign, "I've done something wrong." They're disappointed. This is the conversation where everything falls apart. You spend hours preparing defenses for accusations that were never made. And when you finally talk, it's about something mundane. But the pain you felt was real, because the belief was real. The conversation was just a trigger. The depth here is that your identity is so externally referenced that a 4-word text can rewrite your entire internal state. That's not sensitivity. That's outsourcing. That's giving away the coordinates of your inner stability and hoping no one uses them against you. But they don't have to use them. You use them. You weaponize their words against yourself before they even know what they've said. Now, the final layer, the part that will make you uncomfortable. The reason you believe these things about yourself is that they were useful once. Believing you were too much kept you from being abandoned. Believing you were not enough kept you striving. Believing you were difficult kept you from asking for needs that would have been denied. These beliefs were adaptations. They helped you survive your environment. But now you're surviving yourself, and that's no longer useful. The words that hurt are the ones that remind you you're still using an outdated operating system. A system that says your worth is conditional. Your needs are negotiable, and your self is a problem to be managed. But the system is wrong. Not because you're perfect, but because you're not a problem. You're a process, and processes evolve. So here's the reframe. You're not hurt by words. You're alerted by them. Alerted to a belief that is ready to be updated. The pain is a signal, not a sentence. It's your system saying, this belief is no longer serving you. But you've been misreading the signal as an attack. You've been shooting the messenger and missing the message. The message is, you get to choose what you believe, not in a motivational just think positive way. In a literal, mechanical way, you get to watch the translation happen and ask, is this belief current? Is it accurate? Is it mine? Most of the time, you'll find it's a hand-me-down from someone who needed you to believe it, so they wouldn't have to deal with your full self. A final scenario to lock this in, you're in therapy or a deep conversation, and someone reflects back, it sounds like you're being really hard on yourself. And you feel tears, not because they said something profound, because they named the mechanism. They saw the prosecutor, and in that moment you realize the trial was always internal. The words were always evidence you planted. The jury was you. The open loop you're left with isn't how do I stop believing? It's what am I ready to believe instead? Not the opposite, not I'm amazing. That's just another performance. But something true. Something like, I am a person who sometimes believes painful things about myself, and I am learning to notice when that happens. That's it. That's the exit. Not a new identity, but an identity that includes awareness of the mechanism. And in that awareness, the words lose their weight. Not because you've built thicker skin, but because you stopped needing skin at all. You become the space where the words appear, not the target they hit. You become the observer of the translation, not the victim of the translation's result. This is the shift, from believer to witness, from reactive to aware, from hurt to alerted. And it doesn't happen once. It happens in that micro moment over and over, until one day you realize a word that would have destroyed you last year just passed through. Not because you're stronger, because you're no longer there to be hit. you've stepped out of the architecture and into the open air? The last thing to sit with, what if the words you fear most are the ones that will set you free? What if selfish, dramatic, too much, not enough? What if these are not accusations but invitations? Invitations to see the belief, to name it, to choose whether to keep it. What if every painful word is actually a door, and you've been banging on it from the inside, thinking it was a wall? All you have to do is turn the handle. But the handle is awareness, and the key is already in your hand.